Hello, and thank you for joining us for this very special episode of AMA's Marketing In. I'm your host, Bennie F. Johnson, AMA CEO. In our episodes, we explore life through a marketing lens, delving into the conversations with individuals that flourish at this intersection of marketing and the unexpected. We plan to introduce you to visionaries whose stories you might not have heard of, but are exactly the ones you need to know. Through thought-provoking conversations, we'll unravel the challenges, triumphs, and pivotal moments that have been shaped by marketing. Today, my guest is a great innovator and friend, Brian Rice, Senior Vice President, Global Chief Design and Brand Experience Officer at the 3M Company. As the global leader for the 3M design, corporate brand, and partnerships function, Brian oversees 3M's endeavors to leverage company purpose, brand position, design, and corporate partnerships to connect with customers, consumers, stakeholders, continually delivering on the company's legacy of 3M science applied to life. Brian brings more than 25 years of deep experience. He's bridged the power of design thinking with a focus on business and marketing strategy for some of the world's most valuable, trusted, and iconic brands. Companies including Procter & Gamble, the Coca-Cola Company, Bristol-Myers Squibb, and Georgia-Pacific. Throughout his storied career, Brian has led brand positioning, purpose development, brand design, packaging, product, and innovation development. I'd like to welcome today none other than Brian Rice to our podcast.
Great. Thank you, Benny.
Oh, my goodness.
Thank you.
I look forward to sitting down with you in this format for so long, my friend. It's just...
I'm glad we figured it out.
Yeah.
We got the calendar to work out. So thank you for having me.
It's an honor. And I know our audience is going to enjoy our conversation just as much as I am in this case. You know, one of the themes when I think about 3M and I think about you and your career is simply this word, breakthrough. You know, 3M is always known for success as being these breakthroughs in terms of science and unexpected. As a metaphor for that, tell me just a little bit about your career path and that kind of your first breakthrough.
Well, Benny, what a great way to start the conversation off. I think my career has been nothing but a breakthrough.
Right.
We're talking about a kid who, candidly, when I went to college, I didn't know what design was. I just had this knack for creating things, but also deeply into the academic side of things too.
Mm-hmm.
And so one of those kids that excelled in, algebra class, but then could design the class float. And I was always torn between kind of these two worlds. And lo and behold, I found design and figured out that, oh, wow, there is a career in this.
Right.
It's not the starving artist under the highway, like my mother used to say, beware of.
Right.
But a fruitful career that allowed me to do what I love to do best, which is to create, but also to create things of value, right? Which is kind of more of the analytical, kind of marketing side of things. So truly a breakthrough.
It's interesting when you talk about, your role at 3M and the title of Global Chief Design and Brand Experience. I remember you telling me before that your portfolio really has three functions. It has a design component.
Sure.
And then when I came in this role, I remember the first thing you telling me was like, I've got corporate brand and corporate marketing and partnerships under it. Talk a bit about that synergy that you brought together, which is really powerful.
Yeah, well, when I joined the company, the corporate brand team, which is, think of it as big 3M,
right,
was part of the work of, our organization. And so really the leader who brought me in said, hey, we have this thing called 3M brand, which is big, iconic, but it's probably one of the world's best kept secrets because you probably know all the more iconic brands, Post-it note, Scotch tape, Filtrete, all of those brands. But big 3M also makes products that are more inside the products that you and I use every day. And so the challenge is how do we help, tell that part of the story?
Right.
And design is a storytelling mechanism as well, right? Besides the marketing that we do, it's like, how do we bring it to life in a way, that helps consumers and customers kind of realize kind of the products, services, experiences that we offer as a company.
Right.
And so the challenge that I enjoyed about all of that is that it's a lot of business to business.
Right.
There's a little bit of B2C, right? Business to consumer, right? Which is a bit of my background or more of my background. But at the end of the day, I like to say it's people to people,
Right.
right? And so people have drivers that gets them to do things.
Right.
And so from a design standpoint, how can I get them to act on an insight or on a product delivery system
Right.
that makes sense for their business or for their household?
Mm.
So it was a very nice marriage of brand and all the things that we do as marketers and insight stewards and strategists and all
Right.
of that. And then leveraging the power of design to kind of bring it to life to help people touch it, feel it, see it, experience it, all of those things. And so it was a great marriage and probably one of the things that attracted me to the role.
Yeah, let's talk a bit about that. So what drew you in?
Yeah.
So you're based in Atlanta, right?
Yep.
And spent a lot of quality time with companies and great brands in Atlanta. And with 3M, you're based up in the upper Midwest.
That's right. That's right. So I still haven't gotten used to the winters yet.
All right.
But I joined the company during the pandemic.
Okay.
And so at that time, no one really was in the office, and the company had a program. We created a program which was really called Work Your Way, which
Mm.
allows you to
Mhm.
work from wherever and allows you to kind of do the things that you needed to do, so
Right.
long as we're getting work done. And so I was flying back and forth from Atlanta, which is home base for me. And our largest studio is in the Twin Cities in St. Paul. And
Okay.
so that's
Right.
where most of the designers are. And so I go back and forth. I go about once a month, usually a week and a half at a time, spend time with the team, do what we need to do, and try to get as much of the work done as we can. So certainly a culture difference. The
Right.
Twin Cities is absolutely gorgeous this time of year. The late spring, early summer is absolutely gorgeous.
Right.
But I have to tell you, being a kid that grew up in Florida, the winters are bitter. They
Well,
are
I was going to
bitter.
lean into that. I was like, I knew you're a good Florida kid.
Yeah, yeah,
The stretch. But I'll ask this first question
yeah.
because I think it's really
Sure,
interesting when you think about the language of innovation and brand and
sure.
marketing being part of a language of innovation. How have you been
Yeah.
able to navigate that across 3M's vast kind of network? Because you have a team that's truly global and design centers all over the
Sure.
world.
Yeah, we do. We have design centers in, the biggest in St. Paul. We have a small center in Italy, China, design center in Japan, as well as India. And I can tell you that it's not easy to do, but I have an amazing leadership team that
Mm.
helps get the work done. And so because we are split in different business groups, we try to, of course, deliver on the work that the business needs,
Right.
but also figure out efficiency, scale,
Right.
things that will allow us to be effective as an organization,
Right.
so that we're not kind of relearning things,
Right.
that we're able to knowledge share very quickly, as well as kind of celebrate, right?
Mhm.
Celebrate those wins that we might be able to call it search and reapply to other areas.
Right.
And so I always say that every amazing solution starts with an insight.
Right.
You deliver it through an idea, right? That hopefully is a solution that people will buy and pay more for it. And so, regardless of the type of division or the type of product line or what have you, I think I've learned over my career that those kinds of things remain true
Hmm.
no matter what type of business segment you might be in. And so, always start with insight, come up with an idea,
Right.
and how can we bring that solution to life that people will buy?
One of the things that I've always admired about 3M's history was like the breakthroughs that come through by accident. You're attempting to
Sure,
solve
sure,
one problem and then you find this
sure,
beautiful solution to the next. Y-
sure.
How do you encourage your team through those kind of, for quotation fingers, we'll call failures or kind of misapplications to ensure that
Yeah.
there's something dynamic on the other side?
Yeah, they happen all the time. And I think 3Mers have this very vast passion for curiosity
Right.
and that I wonder what would happen if,
Right.
right? If I did this, did
Right.
that. Our scientists are absolutely amazing, and being able to kind of take one technology platform, combine it with another technology platform, and to kind of see what we can come up with. And so we have something that's called 15% time, which is really amazing,
Okay.
which is, each 3Mers has 15% of their time that they can explore whatever is of passion or of interest to them. And there's different, mechanisms that we have or forums that we have around the company, whether it's a hackathon or, collaboration
Right.
sessions or what have you, that will allow us to explore that idea further, maybe get a little funding to kind of see, is it viable? Is it feasible, right? Is it desirable? It's all of those things that come in with the typical innovation process. And so we try to spur that
Right.
as much as we can. Now we got work that we have to get done, Benny, right?
Right.
Those are the priorities. Those are the things that keep the lights on and pays the bills. But we also have that time that we try to spend on thinking of different ways of doing things, new ways of doing things. And it doesn't hurt when you have a customer that comes to you
Right.
with a challenge
Right.
that kind of says, hey, we're trying to figure out this, and having our product engineers, our designers, our R&D scientists try to work on that problem
Right.
to solve it. And so we try to share. We share failures. We share successes. We kind of build together
Mm.
when we can to help inspire or spark the work that our amazing teams do. So we try to do it as much as we can when we can.
It's amazing when I think about this. When we first started our careers, these roles didn't exist, right? Just in the
Exactly.
span of a career, you're now looking at brand and design being elevated to a C-level position in a major company like 3M. When you take stock of that, when you think about that trajectory,
Yeah.
what amazes you the most when you think about that growth over time?
Well, I tell you, Benny, when I left college, I did undergrad at Florida A&M
Yes.
in our School of Journalism and Graphic Communication. And when I was going through the program, for the most part, what we saw as the trajectory, if you
Right.
will, was go work in an agency, you'll move up the company ladder, if you will, and you'll be successful. If you were lucky enough, maybe you went out and had your own agency, you hung your own shingle out front, and maybe you had your own shop. But you're right, this idea of corporate design didn't exist when it existed, but I didn't know about it
Right.
when I came out. And so as I take stock of just the trajectory, my first job out of college was in design management,
Mm-hmm.
and really didn't know what that was, right? And so I crossed paths with P&G at the time. And what it really did was it sped up my trajectory, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so here I'm able to kind of learn and fail
Right.
with a company that was willing to teach me how to manage design, because again, I think I was one of the first at Procter and Gamble that they recruited straight out of undergrad.
Okay.
And so their hypothesis was, we think we can teach design management
Right.
to an undergrad. And so I was a bit of the test market for that. And so candidly, Benny, I loved it. I loved it as much as I did designing. It's like,
Right.
okay, I get to lead some of the biggest agencies in the world with some of the biggest products and brands in the world. Not so much doing the work, but
Right.
leading the direction of the work, right? And so that might be talking to a marketing manager, understanding what it was that they were trying to do, trying to deliver for consumers, right, or customers or users, and then figuring out very quickly, it's like, okay, well, how can design help enable that? And so I loved that back and forth
Right.
between business problem, potential design or product solution that would help deliver the outcome that they were looking for. And so I just moved up the
Right.
chain, right? From a senior design manager, you become a director of a
Right.
business, of a business team, and then you do it globally, right?
Right.
And so it's not just US, it's global platform or landscape. And then you do it for bigger and bigger companies. And so I had the luxury of being able to kind of take one step at a time. It's
Right.
like, what's the next right answer?
Right.
Not really knowing, kind of like, okay, I think I might like that job. And so really kind of dipping my toe, if you will,
Right.
into that experience to say, hey, is this something that I would enjoy doing?
It,
And
it,
so it's been step by step.
it's really interesting. I hear you talk about the journey, and it makes me think about, in some respects, we're all innovation projects.
Sure.
We're all innovation projects that are looking for, can we find an insight? Can we find a solution? Can we find an organization or person to kind of serve as an executive sponsor?
That's right.
To kind of lead us into that. One thing that's always been a part of your career is service to the community around you and being engaged in that. I want to take it back a little bit when I talk about this executive sponsorship. I know we've talked a lot about mentorship and those people in your lives that are shining space in there. Talk a bit about your experience at FAMU, because you had a mentor who just
Yeah.
kind of blew the doors open.
Sure, sure. And thanks for that because mentoring is huge. I'm a product of mentoring, and you've heard me kind
Right.
of say this that, mentors help you figure out what you don't know.
Right.
They not necessarily give you the answer, but helping you, here's what you don't know, and this is what you need to learn. But my first internship after I think in my freshman year, was with a little newspaper in Orlando, the Orlando Sentinel.
Okay. Yes.
And I got a summer internship there, not as a designer, believe it or not, Benny, but more as a copy runner. And
Okay.
so reporters would, back in the day when reporters used to kind of type on the computer, they used to print it out. I used to go run, get the story, take it to the reporters so that they could proofread it and do all of those manual editing things that they used to do way back when. But there was a designer that was in I think it was the editorial graphics department. I'm going to give him a shout out.
Uh-huh.
Essex James. We are friends to this day. I
Nice.
can call him up right now and he will be at my door within an hour. But I met Essex, and Essex was a graduate of Florida A&M. And one of the things that we would do, he no longer works there, so I can probably say this now,
All right.
is that Essex would allow me to design things on the front page of the Orlando Sentinel. And so,
Oh,
so behind the scenes, I was figuring out how to lay out kind of copy and photos and headlines and all of those things to get some experience with the design part of journalism, if you will,
right.
or
Right.
editorial graphics, that sort of thing. And so Essex was just teaching me along the way. So it's one thing to learn theory and ideas and principles in college.
Mm-hmm.
But Essex really, really kind of took me under his wing to kind of say, "Hey, try this.
Right.
You can do this. Like, let's work on back in the day when you had the comics on the back page
Right.
of the newspaper. He used to let me color the comics, Benny. I mean, it was
Uh-oh.
like all kinds of things that only he and I kind of knew.
Right.
And so I would literally, back in the day, get the newspaper and say, "Hey, mom, I did this, right?
Right.
I did the front page. I selected the image. I put the headline here, and we're trying to fit the copy in. And so we had to move it to A6 and, all of that, which was just fascinating to me. And so Essex really kind of gave me that push,
Right.
that gentle nudge, that push to really kind of pursue a career in design. But not only that, the confidence that I could do it.
Right.
And so it was a safe space that allowed me to do it. And candidly, Benny, that's what I try to do now for young
Mm-hmm.
designers, right? Where can I give them a safe space to
Right.
explore, but also give students the confidence that they can do it as well, but even better,
Right.
because they get to learn from all the stuff that, man, if I were your age, I wish I would have done that.
Right.
And so again, not giving them the answer, but helping them understand or maybe identify what they don't know.
Which is really, really, truly invaluable. And we think about how dynamic the space is, right? Of
Mhm,
design, of brand marketed, of corporate engagement.
mhm.
Some of the rules and the functions didn't exist, like we said before,
Right.
and they're being transformed now. So, when you think about breakthroughs, what advice do you give to young professionals looking for a breakthrough?
Well, I tell you, that's a tough one because sometimes it happens to you,
Right. Right.
or you can figure out how to disrupt yourself, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think the advice that I would give, I guess, my younger self, right?
Right.
I think change is inevitable
Right.
and it will happen. And I think the sooner that we learn to embrace change and pivot as we need to pivot, I think the better off we will be. Nothing will be constant. And if I just think about my last, call it 3.5, 4 years
Right.
since the pandemic, I mean, things have changed at a rapid pace that none of us have ever seen. And so I think the desire or the ability to be able to adapt and be flexible to this change
Right.
that's going to occur, I think the sooner that we can do that, I think the better off we'll be. And probably the second piece that I would offer up, and it's related to change, is empathy, right? Empathy is that new, kind of leadership trait
Mm-hmm.
that whether you're a designer, a marketer, a CEO, a supervisor of others, right?
Right.
This
Right.
this notion of being more empathetic, I think certainly will allow you to deal with certainly the first piece, the change piece,
Right.
right? And thinking about like, well, why is this occurring? Or what else do we need to think about? I think these are the kinds of skills, right? Softer
Mm-hmm.
skills, right?
Right.
Than the hardcore technical skills, or in addition to those hardcore technical skills, I should say,
Right.
I think is becoming increasingly important because things are changing. They're
Right.
changing rapidly. They're changing daily, hourly. And if you think about our profession, it's changing with one tweet,
Yeah.
right? And I think it's important for us to embrace that
Right.
but also to figure out how best to get ahead of it when we can.
Right.
I think that bodes well for us.
It's so true. And we realize that as we advance in our profession, how artificial the boundaries really were. Right.
Yeah,
When we
yeah,
think about it, I look at your
right.
portfolio, it's core
Hmm.
design, it's
Hmm.
brand thinking and strategy, right? It's problem solving,
Yeah,
but you also have relationship building. And those aren't
sure,
owned in any one domain, right? You're thinking
right.
about it throughout the space in there. When you look at what innovation looks like, and that's really a question for you. I mean, you're at one of the most annually deemed one of the most innovative companies on the planet, right? So, what gets you excited about the possibility of innovation?
I think 3M has this amazing way of helping the world kind of see what's possible.
Right, right.
And so when I think about what gets me excited is the fact that there are still questions out there
Hmm.
and still things to be answered. And I think to the extent that, we leverage our amazing ability to use material science to solve some of the world's biggest challenges, I think that excites me.
Right,
And so, because we know that those challenges are out there, we know that 3M has a place to play in that. And more importantly, as I think about the role that design can play,
right.
again, and showing the organization what might be possible. I tell my team all the time, I said, one of the greatest skills that we have, and we use it, but sometimes we're not conscious about what we're actually
Hmm.
doing,
Hmm.
is helping our organization to see what they're saying.
Mm,
And so too often we can get wrapped up in all the words and the jargon and all of that.
right.
And every once in a while, you just need to pull out a pen and sketch something on a a world famous post-it note and
Yeah.
say, "You mean something like this? Was it this what you meant? Oh, that wasn't it. And let's try it again. And let's try it again." And so, I think the our ability to leverage material science in a way that helps us to create what might be next. And
Right,
so that's kind of what keeps me excited about our innovation engine.
right,
Got work to do for sure, but I think certainly we have a lot of the fundamentals that were here before I arrived
right.
that I get to kind of leverage and exploit and build upon to again help the world be a better place.
So, a question. So, we've talked about you as an inspiration to others. So, today, where do you
Yeah.
find inspiration?
Wow. I have to go back to my roots,
Right,
and I find it whenever I talk to young people.
right,
I think that's kind of where I find the most inspiration. And so whether I'm talking to I mentor on the weekends, and these are young people that are in high school,
right,
and just kind of talking to them and kind of hearing how they think about things because they don't know the rules. They don't know Benny all the things that
right,
they're
right,
not biased
right,
by all the stuff that you can't do or what have
right.
you. They just have that pure, like
No,
unbiased
no, no,
creativity
no,
of what's
no
possible.
filter, no structure, no edge.
No,
Right?
none of that, none of
Yes.
that. And I'm just amazed at like, how did you put that together, right? Like, how did you think about that? Because I can tell you when I was 16, 17, I might have had the thought, but I certainly didn't have the ability to maybe act on it, right? I
Right,
didn't have people around me say, "Oh yeah, that's a business," or "Oh yeah, you need to study that," or what have you. And so for me, it happens with the younger generation
right,
and watching kind of popular culture and seeing the things that work and some of the things that don't. And then, of course, it's going back to undergrad and talking to design students and kind of hearing some of the things that are on their mind,
right,
some of the things that they're working on. I think it's just amazing, the amazing potential of what if.
right,
I think is the thing that excites me about what I see. I look at the work and it's like, wow, that is an amazing insight. And
right,
so what are you going to do with it? Right.
right,
And so I
right,
get to push them a little bit. It's like, just don't let that idea die there. Like, do something with it. And so test it, validate it, do all of those things that we learned in design school
right,
to maybe bring it to fruition. And so I tend to get inspired by more of the younger generation
right.
in terms of the things that they're doing across the board in many, many different
Well,
fields.
hearing you just gets me super excited as well and inspired because it's that interchange, right? Mentorship,
Right.
mentorship in its truest forms is circular. It works both
It is.
ways, right? And if you think about that, it's validating and amplifying the insight that they have, right? Because we might have had good ideas, but having somebody who's going to trouble make with you and go, so yeah,
Sure.
what are you going to do about it? How are you going to get there?
Sure.
So you want to build a business. Okay. So how can I then be active in your success or
That's right.
your journey, right? Because a big part of
Right.
it, as you said, is being in there and trying is really the
Yes.
gem.
Yes. Yeah, no, I think that is half of it, and I think we all need that. I call it the shot in the arm or that
Right.
nudge to kind of say, do something with that.
Right.
And oh, by the way, you can, right? It's a
Right.
better idea than you actually probably think. And so sometimes just hearing that, right?
Right.
Just like it's that simple kind of, I call it that simple nudge that will get you to act on that
Right.
idea. And I know a lot of the students, they have it, right? They
Right.
just need folks like you and I to continue to push them.
It's
Like,
like
you got
you
this.
can, you got
You
this.
got this. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. They do. And so I'm often inspired by the work or just the gems of the idea that I see when I go back to my alma mater and judge design competitions or talk to students at Pratt or Parsons or wherever it might be. I
Right.
think those are the kinds of exchanges where sometimes I feel guilty because I get a little bit more out of it than probably the students do. And
Right.
so it's like, wow, like we're in good hands. We are in good hands. We just need to continue to push.
So what I love is about that exchange, right? I get more out of it
Yeah.
in the space. But the
Yeah.
real kind of global impact of your reach and role and presence. So at any given time, you're talking about mentoring students in Atlanta or FAMU, but you're also spending time. I know you just had a major trip. You went to Milan for Design Week.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
talk
I knocked
about
that
that
off the bucket
experience,
list.
right?
Yeah. Well, I will give you a little bit of context. And so this is something that 3M had been doing for many, many years. I think over 10 years, we had been going to Milan Design Week, started by my predecessor and his predecessor. And
Right.
so that we had a presence there. And so we kept this engagement over the last several years. The last 2 years, COVID has at least slowed me down personally, and I couldn't make the trip. So this last trip, I was able to go and kind of see the work that one of our business groups is doing with a pretty well-known company that makes a lot of architectural products.
Okay.
It's actually called Archi Products. And so we were part of their installation
Oh,
and being
nice.
able to share some of the design products that we have in our commercial films division. And so it was exciting to kind of see it come to life and kind of see architects and interior designers. We
Mm-hmm.
partnered with a local studio to kind of bring this experience to life while also launching our new architectural finishes products. And so it was amazing just to see that had my trip ended there, that would have been wonderful. But I also was able to spend a couple of days to also see some of the installations of other brands and
Mm-hmm.
companies, right?
Mm-hmm.
That brings
Right.
these folks to Milan, which is arguably one of the design capital of the world, kind of see how they are sharing kind of their brand experience, their brand story in a way that attracts, kind
Right.
of design connoisseurs, if you will, and even those who are just
Right.
fans of design,
Right.
right? And it was absolutely amazing to kind of see back to that insight idea.
Right.
What is the solution? Whether it was IKEA and some of the work that they were doing, or Google, or a lot of the automotive companies, right? Lexus, Porsche, you name it. I mean, just amazing experiences really
Right.
that they
Right.
created through design, right? And
Right.
so it was just absolutely wonderful to kind of take that in. My first time to Italy, and so it was my first time attending the event, and so it was definitely a bucket list item that I'm glad I got to cross off,
Right.
because it's truly for designers who are very much into the creative process and unexpected, kind of outcomes, is certainly kind of one of those places you want to visit at least once in your lifetime.
Definitely. And you started talking about other brands in space, and I want to spend a couple seconds just talking about the other part of your portfolio. That's a newer
Yeah,
part, which is the partnership. Now you've talked
yeah,
a lot
yeah,
about insight leading to design, leading to solutioning, but then
sure.
that next step of how do you find that right synergy to be 3M
Yeah.
plus, you fill in the
Yes.
blank.
Yeah, no, I think, partnerships was an interesting space. And so when I joined, I didn't have partnerships, a year and a half in, then I took over partnerships, and now it's kind of evolving and moving to a different space. But that aside, I think about partnerships as a brand building opportunity,
Right.
right?
Right.
A brand building opportunity gives us an opportunity to showcase, kind of who we are as a company and as a brand to our customers and to hopefully those communities or properties that we represent. And so our team does an amazing job of finding the right types of partnerships that are synergies, right?
Right. Right.
With our values, right? Our beliefs in a way that becomes more of a win-win-win, right?
Right.
You know, situation, right? And so we do a lot of work with, we have our own golf tournament in the Twin Cities, 3M Open.
Yeah.
We do things that are probably a little closer in,
Mm-hmm.
the Young Scientist Challenge, right? Where we
Mm.
recognize and
Mm-hmm.
look for future scientists of tomorrow, right?
Right.
And so it's a really great opportunity for us to kind of showcase young scientists, but also leverage kind of the science of 3M to
Right.
help bring to life some of the amazing kind of invention and innovation that these young people have across the US and even the world. And so things like that, you know, we look for those types of relationships, right?
Right.
Authentic relationships where we can share a little bit about who we are, but also help amplify
Right.
other properties or other brands in a way that is mutually beneficial. And so, you know, we often get a chance to kind of help bring that to life as well, whether it's showing up at CES or Milan Design Week or a major golf tournament, right? Those are different ways that we try to leverage the brand to build it in terms of our reputation and the trust that we try to, you know, create with our many constituents and stakeholders.
I think that's incredible when you talk about how you kind of reinforce it to build the trust. I am, you know, because you really are a nexus point for so many communities, right? Our creative problem solvers, our brand leaders, those who are pushing the brand more. And we often are working outside of these titles now, right? It just,
Sure.
you know,
Sure.
we come to the table with those titles, but when we really get into the work and get into the sandbox, it all comes together. I love
Right.
to close with, if you could give one call to action to
Mhm.
this is nameless group that's innovating and building brands and leading and creating a new business, what would that call to action be?
You know, it's interesting because you're right. Expanding, and you kind of actually said it. I think feeling okay with leaning into areas that you might not necessarily think you know that much about.
Right.
And I probably have done that all my career, right?
Yes. Yeah.
I left school thinking I'll be a graphic designer in an agency somewhere. And now I'm kind of leading a pretty big organization that I would have never thought of,
Right.
but it kind of leaned in to the next right answer or the next opportunity. And I would say, I would encourage folks to certainly lean into those situations when you kind of think it might be a little fuzzy. It's
Right.
amazing. There's probably a quote out there somewhere, you know, that when you leap, that net will appear. And
Yes.
it does.
Right.
It does, because I think if the folks around you truly care about you, they won't let you fail.
Hmm.
And so, yeah, you'll have some mishaps and some obstacles along the way, but certainly kind of leaning into some of those spaces where it's like, I'm not supposed to do that. Well, I think you are supposed to do that, right? There's an opportunity that's in front of you. And so it's up to us to kind of take advantage of it. And I think designers, the way that we think, you know, spirally, and we like to blend things and we like to pull in those external kind of points of inspiration. That's candidly what we do, right?
Right.
And
Right.
that's what makes us a bit more unique, right?
Right.
As compared to other functions or other disciplines. And so I think leaning into those unexpected places, I think will do a lot for one's career and one's just ability to contribute at levels that they probably wouldn't have imagined that they would able to do. So I certainly have tried to take advantage of that as best I can.
I think that's a wonderful way to end our conversation today. Where we started, right? We started talking about the breakthrough,
That's right.
and you didn't disappoint, my friend. You know, being able to share as an example of what breakthrough thinking looks like, feels like, leads like, and inspires like.
Awesome, Benny.
So thank you, Brian. It's such a pleasure. We will do this again next year. For those who are listening, we have a little surprise in plan for you for next year, but Brian and I are going to spend some more time talking. Once again, it's been a pleasure to have Brian Rice, Global Chief Design and Brand Experience Officer of the 3M Company, as our guest today on AMA's Marketing Ad. Thank you for joining us. We encourage you to see all of the innovation, new ideas, and programming with 3M. We also encourage you to follow us on ama.org. Thank you.